Way Part 2. Loki saluted the dragon by waving his hand and saying, "Good morning, Primrose." "Oh, here is Pantone," protested Primrose. "I prefer your true name, and frankly, there's no need to use Pantone anymore, now that the war is over," said Loki. "It's over for you, maybe," commented Primrose, "but unlike you, some of us have to continue fighting." "You will figure something out," said Loki, shrugging his shoulder. "So what do you want?" asked the guard. "I want to enter the city. I have a sigil." So did a couple of other weirdos, and I did not let them pass. "Why do you want to enter?" asked the guard. "We are on a tour and wanted to enter your city and see what it looks like," explained Loki. "The country is in the midst of a civil war, if you haven't noticed. This isn't the best or the safest time to be out sightseeing like a bunch of witless tourists," rebuked Primrose. "I can handle myself just fine," said Loki proudly. "What's wrong with you? What part of a civil war did you not understand?" snarled Primrose, with her nostrils flaring up. "It's fine. You worry too much about such trivial matters. You fight just as before, and civil war doesn't really mean anything for soldiers, and the only difference between them and now is that there's no longer a centralized government fighting a bunch of rebels," argued Loki. "You certainly do make the convincing argument," said the guard. "Don't let that silver tongue fool you," said Primrose, slamming her tail against the ground, and she added, facing Loki, "You are not entering within, and that is final." Turning serious for a second, Loki said, "You are not in the position to prevent my passage inside. Do not forget what we are." "Don't flatter yourself. I am well aware of what you are, and there's no need to inflate your sense of importance. The world does not turn for your sake, but for ours. And when the time comes, you will depart like all of the other ones who came before you," said Primrose. Loki took a deep sigh, and then he said, "Sorry, you petite dragon." Loki then took the reins of the horses, and he started walking towards the east face of the mountain, and the guard was placed in that section as a decoy. And the true entrance to Sibella was a few kilometers away around the mountain, and annoyed Primrose yelled, "Hey, you are not allowed inside." "Who died and made you king?" asked Primrose. "Bersamin. Now you are not going inside," insisted Primrose. "You are welcome to try to stop me, but I assure you that won't end pretty," said Loki. And Primrose looked towards the forest, and a strong wind brought an unfamiliar scent. And the same scent was rather numerous, and based on the scent alone, Primrose guessed that there was about a dozen strange beings trailing behind Loki. And looking in the direction that Primrose was staring at, Loki said, "Oh, that? They are just the princess's guard. Should I fail, they would happily take over, so killing me would not be the end of your troubles." "Why must you be so difficult?" asked Primrose. "I really would rather not engage in mortal conflict with an ally over something so trivial. Whatever it is that you need, I can fetch and sell it for you for a modest price: clothing, swords, pottery, furniture, houses, you name it. But you are not allowed inside. Since you are so keen to offer, pray do carry the entire city from behind the mountain and put it in front of me so that we may see it," insisted Loki. Inside the carriage, Alida said to Ingrid, "Shouldn't we interfere?" "That Loki is a stubborn child, and it's a lot easier to just let him do what he wants," said Ingrid. "How foolish," said Alida more to herself, and there was a slight hint of disappointment in her hiss. "How foolish." In the end, the chromatic dragon guard Primrose opened the gates of Sibella to the outside of Loki, and the entrance to Sibella was through a network of caves, and there was not an interior light, and only those who lived could maneuver the intricate maze, and the fastest way was to fly over the mountain. And the dragon took the horses and the carriage over the mountain beforehand, while Ingrid, Loki, and Alida had to travel on foot. And the guide was a small bat-like dragon named Heborax, and he was as large as a human, with wide, blind eyes, a pronounced nose, and long ears, and his elongated whiskers were as the catfish, touching and feeling his way in front of him. And from time to time he would stop and smell the air, and then change his direction or backtrack around another corner. Eventually, Alida was compelled to ask, "Are you lost or something?" "No," said Heborax coolly. "This mountain used to be an active volcano, and even though it's been dead for millennia, from time to time nauseous vapors rise to the cracks in the rocks, and they could be fatal to humans or snake ladies." "How is it that your first thought is to assume I'm a snake and not related to the Dragon King?" protested Alida. "Heh, we know our own," snorted Heborax. And eventually the cave lighted up enough to not need a torch, and Loki extinguished it to allow for the light of the glowworms to become more visible. And the floor was damp, and the faint dripping of water could be heard from time to time. And Heboras then commented, "It is not that we do not desire visitors, rather it's far too much of a bother to escort hundreds of whiny, puny little humans through the cave system." "You could carry them," insisted Ingrid. "We are not packed mules, my lady, and doing that every day for a crowd would be the murder on our backs," explained Heboras. "Ah, I see," said Ingrid. Eventually the group came to a dead end, and there was only a small pool of aqueous purple water, and Loki looked at the water and noted traces of gold salts mixed with the thin chlorine, and not too convinced, Loki asked, "Is that not aqua regia?" "It's just regular aqua," said Heboras, grinning, and he added, "though I would hope you are not wearing anything too fancy because we are going to have to swim for it." "How annoying," protested Ingrid. And the sisters stripped down and handed their attires to Loki, who placed them inside his hair for safekeeping. And Alida, who was the most gimmicky of the visitors, was to pass first, and Heboras pondered on how to take her across, and she being a snake enough. And Heboras stared at Ingrid with his wide, sightless eyes, and then he said, "Now this is interesting." "What is?" inquired Alida. "Pay me no mind. Now as for the snake lady, you are going first. Do you know how to swim?" asked Heboras. "I can swim just fine, and my eyes can see underwater. Mind you, this water seems a bit too unusual," commented Alida. Loki reached into his hair and brought out water goggles made of wood and covered with rubber and glass, and he tied them to Alida's face, and thus she jumped into the water. And Loki offered Ingrid a pair, but she declined, and she jumped into the water and started bubbling bubbles with her mouth, and eventually one of the bubbles she summoned was large enough to cover her head. And Loki unceremoniously cannonballed into the water and piercing his side against a stalagmite. Like he just cannonballed into it and then like he hit a rock. Ah! Smelling the blood, Heboras picked his head outside the water and he asked, "Are you alright?" It's fine, said Loki with his wound already starting to blow. And Heboras bellowed like a crocodile for a couple of minutes, and then he dipped his head below the water, and the trio followed after him. And while swimming, Alida noticed some strange pink-colored fishes with whiskers, and their extremities were almost see-through, and they had no eyes, and others had their body type like a barracuda, but with a smaller length and blue fins. And Alida rushed backwards and hid behind Loki, and when an oversized angelfish swam by, and unlike the traditional counterpart, this one was violet with its wings pitch black. And the tunnel eventually opened into a large underwater lake, and a single light shone into the cave as a rope with a bucket descended to its very depths. Pointing towards the bucket, Heboras said, "It is not the traditional way of entering the city, but considering your circumstances, you really do not have much of a choice. And I will call Urea, and she will get the share for you." Heboras flew to the roof and somehow managed to squeeze through the tight hole, and his body was mostly made of cartilage, so he could squeeze through most tight gaps like an octopus. And while waiting for the share, Loki noticed the strange signs in certain parts of the cave, and one of them had a cookie drawing of Arasa with a writing that read, "Stop, prevent your death, go no further." And there were other signs in other areas warning of dangers ahead, and one which made Loki chuckle read, "Sephardine is in heat. Males best not approach." And based on previous observation, Loki knew that Sephardine was a coveted chromatic dragon who was famous for enticing males to fight over her, and it was not too uncommon for some dragons to end up almost biting the bricks, almost ending up dead. And any non-male dragons that wandered into the messy fighting usually always ended up dead. And the water around Ingrid started bubbling as she tried in vain to summon fire magic to warm herself, and she placed her hand on Loki's shoulder and Alida's back, but neither of them emitted any body heat, and without something like warmth or fire, Ingrid could not warm her surroundings, and in the end she settled for trembling and waiting for the share to be lowered. And Alida did not mind the cold much, being cold-blooded. It didn't make her a bit sleepy, so she floated over the surface of the cave, of the still water cave. And the only sound heard came from the water dripping from the rocks in the roof, and eventually a new sound was heard, and with it the share was lowered. Bro, time?
5 minutes.
Ingrid was the first person to be unceremoniously raised, and Alida soon followed, with Loki flying out of the well in the form of an overgrown ribbon-tailed Astrapia bird. And the dragon on the surface jumped back a bit when Loki squeezed through the hole, but he soon regained his old form. And the well was located in the middle of the fountain maze, and normally fountains were simply for show. However, the dragons tended to bathe inside of them, like the local birds. As such, this one was designed to be larger and more interactive, featuring sculpted passages and artificial water barriers, and at the center of the fountain was the well. And those who wanted a bath with mineral water could draw it from the well. And a little hid behind Loki, embarrassed to be surrounded by so many curious eyes, and there was about a dozen full-grown chromatic dragons and about 30 dragonlings. And Ingrid raised an eyebrow and proceeded to casually walk through the maze and into the open street. And Loki handed her a towel which she used to dry herself and get dressed, and a little coil and turning herself and swung her head about in mimicry of a dog drying himself. And when she thought herself dry, she called into her outfit, which she closed using her mouth and her tails, and the dragons watched with mild amusement the new arrivals. It was not every day visitors came to the well, and normally they were unceremoniously flown over the mountain and dropped into the visitor center. And the visitor center was an area allotted to small humanoid visitors, and all of the homes were built to scale from the sole pieces of wood and rocks, and the main artisan was not a chromatic dragon, but a very, very old and very bored twin-headed dragon, who was the only one of his kind, and his body was like a rooster, except that he was covered in scale. And the tail was dry his own bodiless, and the wings had a dull brown color, and that shimmered red when seen from a different angle, like a blue morphous butterfly. And the only claws he had were found on his leg, which resembled the legs of a falcon. And the first head was decorated with jewelry and wore a crown, in addition to the rings and the horn, and the second head was plain-looking, with the mane of a bit of a tangled mess, and the second head was always limp and never seemed to move, though the first head insisted that his brother was asleep. And the only clue that this was so occurred when the first head tried to untangle the mess of hair of his sibling. And the species of this dragon was not listed in the book, and anything that unique looking was often shoved under the primordial dragon category in Call of Days. So like whenever there was an unusual dragon, they said, oh, it's a primordial dragon. That's what was different from everything. But, and then they didn't investigate it. Just a weirdo. Bye-bye. As with most artists, he signed his work with his insignia. A pink ballerina in a releve position with her arms delicately forming a wine glass, and it was a very clever way of signing his name, seeing as though he called himself releve. All the like I wrote the word, but I don't know how to pronounce it. It's RELEVE. All the structures have been prebuilt 3,000 years ago by the dwarves, and before the dragons had moved, the dwarves had lived inside the mountain, and what had occurred to them was a matter of speculation. Though Hebra suspected it had something to do with an unexpected volcano eruption or something, and recent excavations have found the ancient city buried under a layer of azure crystal, and nowhere was the lake, and Sibila was built around the lake, and the city was divided into 4 segments. In the northern area were the stables and the entrances to the mines, and humans alongside dragons were always mining and looking for new minerals to feed the chromatic dragon population. And plenty of care was made during those proceedings to keep the lake from getting contaminated. And the lake itself was always strewed by blind catfish dragons that sieved pollutants from the water, and the stable was the home of the dragons who served as mounts for the humans. And they fought together and wore armor like the humans, and the southern segment was the home of the ever-expanding human population and crossbreeds. And the western portion was the market area, with outsiders that traded in coins, though within the dragon riders were stuck in mercantilism, and the overtraders starved with one another, and with the disintegration of the kingdom, debates were raging in the eastern section as to how to deal with outsiders, and until a decision was made, the city was closed to outsiders. And the center of government was in an ancient stone-cut temple, and the temple was older than all of the local dragons, and rebellion found in a deep slumber inside the temple during a standard geological survey 100 years ago, and Loki's party was led towards the temple to discuss the nature and the length of their stay with the Council of Elders, and Benevolence had borrowed much of the style of governance from the Dragon Rider, with a group of ancient dragons discussing matters and the Alpha acting as the final deliberator. The trio did not know what to expect of a court of dragons, and Loki had already been to Blackened, and he remembered the droning of men, and Bersame's imposing presence, and the columns of this building were carved from rocks. Time?